It was one of those freezing nights in Pinewood when the air felt thick with tension and silence hung heavier than the fog that blanketed the ground. Officer Ryan's radio crackled to life just past midnight, pulling him from his paperwork. A young girl named Emily, only 12 years old, had gone missing from her home on the outskirts of town. Her parents were frantic, their voices breaking as they pleaded for help. And within minutes, every available officer and volunteer had gathered at the search site. Flashlights cut through the darkness as the crowd moved in groups, calling her name into the endless sea of trees. But the woods had a way of swallowing sound, making every shout fade as though the forest itself wanted to keep its secrets. After nearly 3 hours of searching, hope was waning, and that's when Ryan made the call that changed everything. He brought in Max, the department's most skilled canine. Max wasn't just any German shepherd. He had a nose that could track the faintest scent and a loyalty that had saved more lives than Ryan could count. The moment Max sniffed Emily's scarf, his posture changed. His ears twitched, his tail stiffened, and with a sharp bark, he lunged forward, pulling Ryan along a narrow, almost hidden trail into the heart of the woods. The further they went, the colder and darker it became, and the mist seemed to thicken. Like an unspoken warning, twigs cracked underfoot, distant owls hooted, and the chilling howl of the wind made every shadow look alive. Ryan felt an unease settle in his chest, but kept pushing forward, trusting Max's instincts. Then, without warning, Max stopped dead in his tracks. His body stiffened, his ears pricked, and his low growl rumbled like distant thunder. Ryan scanned the trees with his flashlight, and that's when he saw her, a small figure crouched behind a fallen log, shivering violently. "Emily," he called softly, lowering himself to her level. Her face turned toward him, pale and streaked with tears, her wide, terrified eyes reflecting the beam of his flashlight. He slowly reached out, but she recoiled like a startled animal. Clutching her knees tighter, Max, sensing her fear, lowered his head and approached carefully, whining softly as if to assure her she was safe now. After a moment, she reached out a trembling hand, touching Max's fur, and only then did she allow Ryan to drape his jacket around her frail body. "Emily, it's okay," he whispered, keeping his voice steady. "You're safe now." But instead of relief, her face twisted in panic as she shook her head violently. "No," she whispered hoarsely, barely audible. "We have to leave. It's still here." Ryan frowned, confused. "What's still here?" he asked gently. But Emily only clung tighter to Max, burying her face in his neck. Then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, a faint metallic creak echoed, like rusted chains dragging across stone. The sound was out of place, unnatural, and it made Ryan's skin crawl. He turned his flashlight toward the darkness, but the fog swallowed its beam, revealing nothing but endless trees. Emily's breathing quickened, and she began whispering frantically, "Please, please, we need to go before it finds us, before—" Ryan could ask another question. Max suddenly barked loudly, his teeth bared, muscles tensed, staring into the blackness beyond. It wasn't just a bark, it was a warning. Ryan instinctively placed a hand on his holster, his other arm pulling. "Emily, close." The forest had gone silent now, deathly silent, as if even the wind was holding its breath. A branch cracked somewhere off to their right, and then nothing. Only Emily's quiet sobs and the sound of Max's low, rumbling growl filled the air. Ryan forced himself to stay calm, speaking softly to Emily. "We're going to get you home. Max won't let anything happen to you." But deep down, He knew she was telling the truth. Something else was out there with them. Slowly, cautiously, he began leading Emily back toward the direction they'd come from, keeping Max ahead to clear the path. Yet with every step, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, as though unseen eyes followed them through the trees. And though Emily stayed silent now, trembling under his jacket, she kept glancing behind them as if expecting something or someone to emerge from the fog. What Ryan didn't know then was that this rescue was only the beginning, and the secret Emily carried would soon unravel a mystery that would terrify the entire town. As Ryan carefully led Emily through the dense fog, every rustle of leaves and creak of branches made his heart pound harder. Max remained alert, his ears twitching, nose low to the ground as if sensing something Ryan couldn't see. The little girl clung tightly to his jacket, her tiny frame trembling as though the cold wasn't the only thing freezing her bones. They had only made it a few hundred yards from where they'd found her when Emily suddenly stopped, refusing to take another step forward. Her pale face turned toward a narrow, almost invisible trail branching off into the darker part of the woods, and her lips quivered as she whispered, "That's where they took me." Her voice cracked with fear, but before Ryan could ask more, Max emitted a deep rumbling growl and planted himself firmly between Emily and the path. Ryan crouched to her level, his voice low and steady, trying to coax her into explaining. "Emily, who took you? What happened?" Her wide, glassy eyes darted nervously between the trees, and she shook her head violently. "They had masks," she finally whispered, her words trembling. "There were candles and chains, and that sound, that horrible humming." Her voice dropped to barely more than a breath as she added, "I think they were going to hurt me." Ryan felt his stomach twist. There had been whispers about strange gatherings in these woods for years, rumors dismissed as urban legends by most locals. But hearing it from a terrified child made it all too real. He glanced down the narrow trail, shrouded in mist, where the shadows seemed darker, almost thicker, as though they hid something that didn't belong. Just then, a sudden gust of icy wind tore through the trees, extinguishing several of the officers' distant flashlights behind them. Ryan's radio crackled, but only static came through, sending chills crawling up his spine. He tightened his grip on Emily's hand and made a decision he wasn't sure was wise. He had to see where that trail led. Max, as if reading his mind, pushed forward cautiously, ears flat, his breathing slow and controlled. Emily clung tightly to Ryan, her steps reluctant, every so often glancing back as though expecting something to leap from the darkness. The trail twisted like a serpent, weaving deeper into the forest until they stumbled upon a clearing. That's when Ryan saw it, an old, dilapidated cabin hidden among the trees, its roof caving in, windows shattered, and a faint flicker of candlelight escaping through the cracks. The air grew heavier here, thicker, almost suffocating, as though the forest itself held its breath. Max stopped at the edge of the clearing, his low growl vibrating like distant thunder. Ryan motioned for Emily to stay behind him, crouched low, and slowly approached the cabin. With every step closer, the air seemed colder, the silence deeper, broken only by the faint, eerie hum Emily had mentioned. It was low, almost mechanical, vibrating in the bones, and it grew louder the closer he got. Suddenly, the door creaked open just enough to reveal a set of chains hanging from the ceiling, glinting faintly in the candlelight. Strange symbols were carved into the wooden walls, twisted shapes Ryan couldn't understand, but that sent a shiver crawling up his spine. Emily clutched his arm, her whisper barely audible. "That's where they tried to keep me. But I escaped when it came." Ryan turned sharply toward her, brows furrowing. "What came?" Her lips trembled, her breath uneven as she whispered, "It wasn't human." Before he could ask more, a loud crash erupted from somewhere deep inside the cabin, followed by a sound so unnatural it made his blood run cold. A distorted growl that vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. Max barked fiercely, lunging toward the cabin, his teeth bared, hackles raised high. Ryan grabbed Emily, backing them away slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. The humming stopped abruptly, and for a terrifying moment, there was silence. Then, from somewhere behind the cabin, branches snapped one after another, as if something enormous was moving toward them. Ryan's breath caught in his throat, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. He caught a glimpse of something shifting in the shadows, tall, hunched, and unnaturally fast, disappearing before the light could touch it. Max snarled, pulling hard against his leash, desperate to chase. But Ryan knew better than to provoke whatever was lurking there. "We're leaving," he muttered under his breath, scooping Emily into his arms as Max led the way back toward the main trail. The forest came alive with strange sounds as they retreated, low whispers carried by the wind, the snapping of twigs behind them, the faint echo of that inhuman growl following in the distance. Emily buried her face against his chest, shaking violently, whispering the same phrase over and over like a prayer. "It's still here. It's still here." When they finally reached the outer edge of the search party's lights, Ryan felt a weight lift off his chest, but deep down, he knew this was far from over. There was something in those woods, something beyond explanation, and Emily's fear wasn't just from being lost. She had seen something no one was meant to see, and Ryan could sense they had only scratched the surface of a terrifying secret that had been buried for far too long. The next morning, after a restless night, Ryan returned to the woods with a full investigative team, determined to uncover the truth about what happened to Emily and what exactly was lurking in that abandoned cabin. Emily was safe at the hospital, her parents by her side, but she refused to speak further about the masked figures or the thing she claimed had saved her. Her terrified silence only made Ryan more uneasy, and Max, who usually returned to work calm and composed, remained restless, pacing and whining as if warning Ryan not to go back. But he had no choice. Something dangerous was out there, and he needed answers. As they retraced the narrow, twisting trail leading to the clearing, the fog hung low like a shroud, muffling the sounds of the forest and making each footstep crunch louder than usual. The closer they got, the more oppressive the air became, cold and damp, carrying an unsettling metallic taint that seemed to cling to the back of the throat. When the cabin finally came into view, it looked even more sinister in daylight, its roof sagging, its walls weathered and splintered, and yet, bizarrely, the faint symbols carved into the wood glimmered slightly under the pale sun, as if freshly etched. Ryan and the team moved cautiously, flashlights ready despite the morning light, and Max growled low, pulling on his leash, reluctant to step closer. Inside, the cabin smelled of damp rot mixed with something burnt, a sharp, acrid stench that made Ryan's stomach twist. Chains hung from the rafters, some broken, others stained with dark, dried smears that looked alarmingly like old blood. Empty glass jars lined a crooked shelf, each containing strange remnants, scraps of feathers, fragments of bone, and something that looked unsettlingly like human hair. The carved symbols covered nearly every surface, spiraling along the walls, floor and ceiling in patterns no one could decipher. A younger officer named Miller knelt to inspect one of the carvings, tracing it lightly with his gloved fingers, but immediately recoiled, swearing under his breath. "It's warm," he muttered, holding up his hand as if burned. "The wood is warm." Ryan frowned, kneeling beside him, but before he could examine it, Max suddenly barked violently, lunging toward the far side of the room where a trapdoor lay half hidden beneath a rotting rug. Everyone froze, the silence shattered only by Max's snarls and the pounding of Ryan's heart in his ears. He pulled the rug back, revealing a heavy, rusted latch. With effort, they pried it open, and a wave of cold, damp air rushed out, carrying with it a sickly sweet stench of decay. A narrow staircase led downward into complete darkness. "We need backup before we go down there," one of the officers muttered nervously, but Ryan shook his head. "If there are answers, they're down there," he said firmly, motioning Max forward as he descended the creaking steps first. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until their breaths came out in white puffs despite the summer heat. Above ground, their flashlights illuminated stone walls, slick with moisture, the carvings continuing endlessly along them, more intricate now, spiraling into shapes that made no sense to human eyes. At the bottom, the narrow passage opened into a chamber that stopped Ryan dead in his tracks. Dozens of tall black candles were arranged in a perfect circle around a raised stone platform, their wicks still smoking faintly as though extinguished. Moments before, the floor was littered with scraps of fabric, small bones, and dark stains that no one wanted to identify. In the center of the platform sat a large, ornate mask, one of the very same Emily had described, its surface carved, with the same strange symbols, its hollow eye sockets staring blankly as if watching them. But what froze everyone in place wasn't the mask or the candles, it was the sound. That low, droning hum Emily had spoken of suddenly began reverberating through the chamber, though no one could tell where it came from. It vibrated in there. Bones made their teeth ache, and sent an instinctive wave of panic crawling up their spines. Max barked frantically, circling the platform, his fur bristling, his growls deep and primal. Then they noticed the walls behind the platform, deep gouges carved violently into the stone, 5 long claw marks in each, as though something massive had fought to escape. Suddenly, the hum stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The flashlights flickered violently, shadows twisting unnaturally around them. "Move," Ryan barked, grabbing Max's leash and motioning everyone back toward the stairs. They scrambled upward as the growling grew louder, closer, accompanied now by the unmistakable sound of heavy, dragging footsteps. As Ryan turned for one last glance, his light caught movement. Something tall and hunched, its limbs too long, its skin pale and slick, sliding from the shadows into the circle of extinguished candles. Its head turned unnaturally toward him. Hollow black pits where eyes should be, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. Then Max lunged, snarling with a ferocity Ryan had never heard before, forcing him to yank the leash and pull him away. They burst back into the daylight, gasping for breath, hearts pounding. When they turned to seal the trapdoor behind them, the humming had stopped, but not because the thing was gone. It had retreated, waiting, watching. Ryan radioed the station, his voice tight. "We've got a bigger problem than we thought," he said grimly. "And whatever's down there, it isn't human." Ryan barely slept that night, his mind consumed by the chilling discoveries beneath the cabin, and the horrifying creature they had glimpsed in the flickering darkness. He replayed the scene over and over, the smoking candles, the mask with hollow eyes, the claw marks deep in solid stone, and that thing's twisted, unnatural form. Back at the station, reports were piling up, radio interference around the forest, missing hikers from nearby towns, and strange, unexplainable howls echoing after sunset. But what gnawed at Ryan most was Emily's silence. She hadn't spoken since they brought her home, except for muttering in her sleep, whispering words that made no sense. That morning, determined to understand, Ryan visited her again. Her parents hesitated but allowed him inside, and when he sat by her bedside, Max resting at his feet, Emily's glassy eyes slowly turned toward him. "You shouldn't have gone back there," she said softly, her voice shaking. "It woke up because of you." Ryan leaned closer, confused. What woke up Emily? The people with the masks. She shook her head slowly, clutching the blanket with trembling fingers. The people, they weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to stop it. They were guarding the door. Her words froze him. "What door?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her tear-filled eyes met his, and she choked out, "The thing under the cabin. It's been there for centuries. They were trying to keep it asleep." A cold chill gripped Ryan's spine. He wanted to dismiss it, call it trauma-fueled imagination, but he remembered the humming, the claw marks, the impossible cold. Something about her words felt terrifyingly true. Before he could press her further, his radio crackled violently, hissing with static until a voice broke through. It was Officer Miller, panicked, shouting over the line. "Ryan, you need to get back to the woods now. The cabin, it's gone." The words didn't make sense until Ryan arrived at the site 20 minutes later, Max bounding beside him. Where the cabin had stood, there was nothing but scorched earth and smoldering embers, as though the entire structure had been burned from the inside out. The trapdoor they had discovered was gone too, buried beneath a mound of freshly overturned soil, as though something massive had collapsed from below. Miller, pale and shaking, explained what happened. At dawn, they'd set up a perimeter to secure the area, but without warning, the ground had begun to tremble. A deep, resonant hum, the same one Ryan had heard, filled the air, and before anyone could react, the cabin simply imploded, sinking in on itself like it had been swallowed. No fire crews had been called, no ignition point was found, and yet the ground radiated heat as though something beneath it had burned. As they spoke, Max suddenly barked sharply, spinning toward the tree line, his teeth bared and hackles raised. Ryan followed his gaze and froze. Standing just beyond the perimeter, partially shrouded by fog, were three figures wearing the same black masks they had found in the chamber below. They didn't move, didn't speak, only stared silently before melting back into the trees like shadows. Ryan gave chase, but when he reached the spot, there were no footprints, no rustling leaves, nothing at all, as if they had vanished into thin air. Returning to the site, he found Miller kneeling in the dirt where the trapdoor had been, holding something in his trembling hands, the ornate mask from the underground platform. But now it was cracked, its carved symbols glowing faintly with an eerie, pulsing light, like embers refusing to die. That night, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about Emily's warning. He visited her again, hoping she could explain more, but when he entered her room, he found her standing by the window, staring at the dark woods beyond the horizon. "It's awake now," she whispered without turning round. and it knows who you are. Before Ryan could respond, Max growled low and deep, his fur bristling, his gaze fixed out the window. In the distance, far beyond the treetops, a faint, unnatural glow pulsed rhythmically, matching the strange humming that had haunted Ryan's dreams since that night.